We are here today to talk about the Virginia versus Banfield case, continuing our conversation from closing arguments, and then we're going to dive into the ICE operations in Minnesota. Welcome to No Contest. This is the Colesrud, King, and Reed report. I'm Claudia King. Alongside me are Holland Reed and Josh Colesrud. How are you two doing today?
Oh, great. It's 70 degrees in Phoenix. I feel like I'm in paradise. I have
Mm-hmm.
no idea what it's like to be in that awful, cold, drizzly weather that I heard is on the East Coast.
Oh, Josh,
Holland.
the shade,
Holland. He's
the
already throwing
shade.
punches.
He just came out the gate with the warm weather while we're sitting here
Right.
looking at icicles on trees. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be the tone for the conversation day. Josh is ready to roll. He's got stuff to say and he's got points to prove. So let's go with your 70-degree weather.
Yeah, here we go with the 70-degree weather. So, if you guys did not watch us on Closing Arguments on Friday, you should. It's on Court TV. You can go look up the replay of it on courttv.com. But we were talking about the Brendan Banfield case. And the last point that I made was around the fact that I wasn't super impressed with the defense's expert on technology and the information that he had gleaned from the different devices. And Josh wanted to say something after that point, and he got cut off by the commercial break. So, Josh, I want to start with you. We have no idea what Josh's point was. We left it alone at that point. But, Josh, I want to throw it to you. What do you want to start with on Brendan Banfield?
Yeah, so to kind of piggy off about like what you were saying, and that is that the defense expert was attributing a name to go with a hole in the chain. So, the technology that is available to both the prosecution and the defense, it does not tell the user or us who was controlling that device. Okay. So, this becomes really important in that case because the original detective who was assigned uh, gave a conclusion that he didn't believe that that he did believe that the victim always had access and control over her devices, and her supervisor, the detective supervisor, said that that was a mistake. You can't attribute a person holding a device when you actually don't know that. There's a hole in the chain. You can't prove that she was the only one that had access to it. But when they replaced that detective with a new one, the new detective then stated that it was the defendant who had access and he was the one controlling the device. So the prosecution's team didn't follow their own advice. Now, the defense, of course, had to counter the prosecution's expert who said that it was the defendant, Banfield, who was controlling the device. Remember, FetLife is this fetish website. For those of you who aren't familiar with the case, this case is a murder mystery. It involves what's called an au pair. It's very popular in Europe. It's where you have usually a young female, 18 to 30, who lives with a family to take care of the kids. And in exchange, the au pair is given room and board. Sometimes their education is paid for. And it's becoming more of a trend here in the United States. So this family had an au pair. She came from Brazil. And the husband began having an affair with this au pair. And it reached to a point where the husband seemed like he wanted to start a new life with the au pair, and she did with him. Now, here's where things kind of get fuzzy. According to the prosecution, the husband didn't want to go through a messy divorce, so he developed this scheme to kill his wife, and he, according to the prosecution, used her name and pictures of his wife on FetLife.com. It's a fetish website. And he put out an advertisement stating that he wanted to do a simulated rape, where everybody knew it was fake, but they wanted to go through the motions anyway with a stranger. And through this fiction, they found a man to do this, and he was instructed to come to the house around 7:30 in the morning, wearing a mask and having a real knife. And he walked up to go rape the wife, although again this is simulated. And during that time, the husband, Mr. Banfield, and the au pair just happened to arrive home, and they caught the so-called rapist on top of the wife, and then that's where things get really messy. So the au pair originally said that she shot the rapist. Again, I say that in quotes. And then, while he was stabbing the wife, and then they called the police, and that was the end of the story. She later recanted that testimony and said that she didn't, and it was all the husband's fault, and Mr. Banfield. Mr. Banfield said that he came in, he had no idea this was going on. He thought his wife was getting raped. So, of course, he had to protect her, and that's why everybody is dead. And he claims that, he didn't know about this. He had nothing to do with it. He, is not the greatest person in the world for having an affair with his wife, but just because you have an affair doesn't make you a murderer. So that's where we kind of start, right? And so we have detectives on both sides saying, well, how did the husband create this account? Well, let's look at the devices. So yeah, it's from the wife's device. The IP address goes to her laptop and to her phone. So there's two ways that you can do it. However, there are two incidents that the defense pointed out where there was communication with the so-called rapist. And the husband was not in the area of where the devices were. And we know that because they were able to track his cell phone at least, and he wasn't in the house. He was where he said he was going to be. I'm not sure about the au pair where she was, so it could have been her. But it couldn't have been the husband according to the technology. So we have competing experts saying, pointing the blame about who it could have been, and then asking the jury to, render a conclusion, which I think is completely unfair. And, that's where I think somebody can do something, they can commit a murder, let's say like O.J. Simpson, but he's not guilty. There's a difference. So you can do the thing and still be.
And that glove could have fit for the time being. I'm just saying. That glove could have fit then, and then the blood shrunk it. I'm not trying to cut you off, Josh. I'm just sorry. That blood, there were so many things. I was like, you got to be kidding me. But to your point, yes, please. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that. I'm like, that wasn't definitive evidence. It just never was.
Just like this case, where it's not definitive evidence. You have a bunch of circumstantial evidence, mainly that the husband didn't want to go through a messy divorce, and he tried to come up with a perfect murder scheme. I don't know if you guys ever saw that movie, A Perfect Murder, with Michael Douglas. It kind of reminded me of that. It was, something out of a bad mystery murder book. But
Gone Girl, where it was the Gone Girl, where it was the wife that set the whole. I'm just saying,
or a simple favor,
It's okay.
And then we have more intrigue here too. We have the au pair who was arrested, right? And she's in custody. She's writing love letters to Mr. Banfield, and she's saying that she will go down to protect him, basically, and she loves everything about him. After a few months, her love kind of dissipates and gets dissolved, and now she wants to change her story. And the prosecution gets a hold of that information and approaches her, and they do a deal. But they're not the only ones to find out that she's switching sides. Netflix hears about what's going on, and because she is now saying she's not the murderer, the Slayer statutes don't apply. The Slayer statute says you cannot benefit from a murder that you participate in. But now, because she's saying she wasn't participating in it, well, now she can profit. So Netflix apparently offered her $10,000 to give her side of the story. So she has all sorts of credibility issues. So as a defense attorney and as a former prosecutor, how do you sort through all this stuff? Well, you look for evidence that corroborates one story or another, because you can't take anybody's word for it. So what's the corroborating evidence that supports the au pair story? Well, I guess the affair, certainly, and maybe some of the digital evidence, but it doesn't explain everything. And that's where reasonable doubt comes in here. And that's why I mean, I don't think that the defendant should or will take the witness stand on Monday, because they don't need him to do that. They already have the doubt. You put him on the witness stand, and the question, it's no longer, what evidence is missing. It now becomes, well, he doesn't sound like he's telling the truth, or look at the way his eyes twitch, or he's not crying enough.
Yeah. Oh, you said that.
We had a behavioral expert on Friday's TV show talk about this. Yeah.
And Josh, you were so perturbed by her. You were so annoyed by her. I was watching you and I was like, oh, okay. I was like, Josh is about to bring in. But Claudia, as I'm the behavioral non-expert here, as you're nodding and shaking and nodding and shaking, can you what were you? Because I think we were nodding and shaking at the same things right now. I'm like, I'm looking at you going, please jump in there. Because Josh I know he was perturbed. We were texting each other and I couldn't figure out what we were agreeing on or what we were not agreeing.
Or what we weren't. And I agree with Josh in that, I see far too often the whole he didn't act right clause of this is why somebody is guilty, because he didn't act right. And it does frustrate me as well. However, what I have seen from Banfield is the fake tears. And I didn't wholly buy into the whole vocal cord thing and this, that, and the other that the lady talked about on closing arguments. I thought that was a kind of a stretch. But what I look at is the fake tear, because he's wiping his eye, but there's nothing there. He's just dabbing for nothing and wiping for nothing. And there's no redness. There's no sniffles. There's just a little weird frowny face in the wipe. And I think if he does testify, which I agree with Josh, I don't think he's going to. And I think the three of us surprised Court TV when we all did. Said that. But I don't think he'll testify either. I think it was strategic in saying that. But if he does, it is a huge mistake, because he's going to continue what he thinks is the right behavior of looking sad, because he wants to act right, because that's what we're supposed to do.
It's performative.
It's completely performative, and he's going to perform wrong.
Court acting coach at this point, I'm like,
right,
bro, what are you doing? Like it was. I'm sorry,
it was so bad.
It was so bad. It was
so bad. But I agree with Josh that I will be watching because I watch far too many true crime shows, everybody, and I'll harken back to that in just a moment. And constantly my husband and I will be watching one, and the prosecutors or police will be saying this, that, and the other. And we're like, oh, he didn't act right. This is where all this is stemming from. He didn't act right. I quickly want to take that hearkening back because everybody knows that I'm the one who calls back to other cases, because I know, again, far too many true crime. So FetLife, if you are a courtie, you might remember FetLife from another recent case, Jordan Henning, who was an ex-U.S. Army soldier who famously shot his wife, went and reloaded, shot her again and spit on her, then claimed he was domestically abused because he's a piece of trash. He admitted, because it was brought out, I think, during his sentencing, that he was on FetLife looking for alternate companionship of a variety that his wife could not provide because it was his wife. So everybody, if you're listening instead of watching,
can we just say, okay, so while you guys were talking, because this is my department. Okay, so kink does not equal felony. Okay,
correct.
Fetish does not equal felony, and fetish does not equal femme fatale. It just doesn't. But it can also equal you're full of crap, and you are trying to now be the hypocrite in a situation that now involves a crime. I just had to say that because nobody's judging any. This is not a judgment or an indictment of character on what you prefer in the bedroom. How your husband likes it, how your wife likes it, whoever. If you bring in 10 people to your bedroom,
good for you.
The minute you start swinging axes and shooting guns and setting up, a discord for insurance policies and committing felonies, then that's where the problem lies. Because if I'm not mistaken, if adultery was on the docket for a criminal offense,
oh my gosh,
we'd all be in jail. I'm not saying we, but we'd all be in jail.
A lot of people would be in jail.
A lot of people would be in jail. So that's not what this is about. And I think people, that's what the character and the boohoos, and I have to act a certain way. It really does come down to, can we not, kink and fetish and preference is not on crime here. No. It's not on crime. It's when you manipulate those things to commit murder, which is what Josh was talking about, using the au pair, you like maneuvering these pieces to create a piece or some type of Tetris board where you're like, okay, we've got the au pair, drop that line. Okay, we've got the storyline, drop that line. And then now you're like, now she's dead. And no, he's dead too. Okay, we've got everything. And I'll get back to the electronics in a minute, but Claudia, finish your point. I just wanted to add that in. I really wish that viewers on court TV and the true crime stories, which is why I think it does make it very entertaining and salacious, because people do forget this is when you get into court, those things are brought up, especially with the Diddy case. In this case, they bring them up to try to assassinate characters, to try to create a storyline for the defense or the prosecution. But let's not forget that the kink in the fetish is not what's on trial. It's the way it's used to facilitate the crime.
Yes. So I want to make a couple points and ask Josh a question on this legally, or kind of, you talked about how the prosecution had a theory that the lead detective kind of went off the
yes.
reservation. I'm going to say it. I'm not politically correct. Okay. Went off the reservation. Just throw me in the comments. I don't care. By saying, oh, she was obviously in control of her devices, but you can't prove that. So do you think the prosecution will do something to attack the defense's theory, saying, oh, well, Brendan's phone was here and Juliana's phone was here when this was happening, at home on her devices, on Christine's devices on FetLife? Well, we already said we can't say who was behind a screen. So couldn't Brendan have taken both of their devices to the gym, or vice versa?
Well, that's a reasonable inference, and you can certainly argue that in closing arguments. However, I feel like if the prosecution had additional evidence regarding the location of the devices, they would have presented it in their case in chief. You don't want to sandbag a defense attorney, because you can never rely on whether or not they're even going to have the type of defense that you're going to have. So you should always do that in your case in chief. But, looking at the different ways that this could have been committed, think about it this. What if both sides are right? Okay. Two things can be true at once. Now, hear me out.
Absolutely.
What if Mr. Banfield and the au pair, Juliet, they come home and the fake rapist decided to be a real rapist. He brought a real knife. Okay. Who brings a real knife? And not only that, but think about this. So when you stab somebody multiple times, 90% of the time you're going to have some type of injury to your hand, because the blood gets everywhere. It's sticky. It's slippery. You're most likely going to have some cuts on your hand, unless there's a grip on it that you don't, do that. And the only person with wounds on their hand consistent with stabbing was the rapist, not the au pair, not Mr. Banfield. And is it completely out of left field that somebody who wants to participate in a rape game might actually be a rapist? And what if the husband did come home and this all did happen? I mean, he set it up, but he didn't think it was actually going to be real. And then it turns out to be real. And there's evidence for it because of the defensive wounds and the fact that he brought a real knife. The knife that was actually used to kill the wife was the one that the rapist brought. It wasn't one that was found at the house. It was one that he brought.
Correct me if I'm wrong. In their FetLife or Telegram conversations, didn't whoever was acting as Christine tell him or ask him to bring a real knife to make it feel more real? Now, I'm not saying, I mean, okay. We earlier said we're not going to judge people's kinks. But I'm going to say, men, if some lady that you've never met before and you meet on FetLife and then on Telegram encourages you to come do a rape fantasy and bring real weapons, maybe do a FaceTime with this person first, maybe meet them in public, maybe something, because you might be being set up. Like, don't just say, this sounds super fun. I'm just going to say that. But Josh, so tell me, and I know you don't like to say what you think a lot of times about a case. So tell me this. What do you think the prosecution needs to bring forth in their rebuttal case to win?
Well, it depends on a lot of things. If Mr. Banfield takes the witness stand, they need to be very prepared. And they need to point out not only the inconsistencies in his statements, but how what he's saying just doesn't jive with the evidence. And they need to hammer that home. And in closing arguments, I think that what they need to do is say, well, yeah, we have the au pair who has some credibility issues, but look at all of this evidence that supports what she's saying. And look at what you would expect an innocent person to do in a case like this, and look at what the defendant did. He didn't act like an innocent person. And
he didn't act right.
Yeah,
right.
There's something wrong with his vocal cords. He was twitching.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I jump in here for
I was getting ready to toss it to you, so you better jump in here.
So I'm jumping in, and I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna bring this down to a super relatable microcosm storytelling for just a couple minutes. So bear with me if you're watching, and I'm gonna try to make this as fast as possible. Y'all know I talk a lot. So three points I wanted to get on was the electronics. My electronics were duped, swapped in, swapped out, used, accounts set up multiple times in multiple arenas in an abusive relationship while I was asleep, while I was cooking them in the kitchen. And it was that simple. Like, hey, I'm going to check this thing, whatever. Okay, no big deal. So it's proximity versus trust. The proximity was there and I trusted them. So the opportunity to do that was there. So I wrote that down because I wanted to be very clear. It does not take, it could be, hey, I'm going to the gym. I don't need my phone with me. I've got my whatever. And it's unlocked and you don't know who's behind that screen, as both of you have expressed, right? That's the factual nature. That happened to me multiple times. Claudia and I talk about devices being used in abuse all the time. And it is something that is problematic. If you're watching, check your connections, who you're linked to, who you're sharing your locations with, and what have you. Trust me, we should probably do a tutorial on that at some point because it's real. It's very real. The second thing is that I want to tell this quick story about the first time I called the police on my ex. And this person, as I expressed to you both before, is a very, influential attorney and entrepreneur here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I called the police on them. And when the police got there, she hightailed it up to the very top of our condo, put herself in her room, collected herself together. And I went down to the very bottom of the stairs. They're banging on the door. And I said, please listen to me when I tell you this. These three officers, I said, she's an attorney. She's unbelievably smart. And she's already upstairs pulling herself together. And they were like looking at me like I was crazy. So they knocked, because it's a wellness check. So they're knocking on the door. They do the typical steps. And they said, do we have permission to enter? Yes, you do. They go up the first set of stairs. They're calling her name. They go up the second set of stairs. They're calling her name. She's not answering because she's fixing everything, her hair, her craziness. Mind you, there is a plethora of all these items, things that have been thrown around, whatever, and they're looking around. They're doing the assessment, as you know, Claudia, as a law enforcement, would assess. They said, is she upstairs? I said, she's probably in her office. She's pulling herself together. She gets to the top of the stairs. She opens the door. She goes, hey, what's going on? And I'm just standing there, and I was like, here we go. Here's the performance. And the first thing out of her mouth, and they said, Miss Holland, can you just come here? Whatever, can you tell us what's going on? And I said, she's threatening her life. She's threatening me. She's being abusive. She's being physically abusive. What should I do? And she snapped her head and she said, what did she tell you? To the officers. And the officers looked at me. They said, ma'am, can you just go downstairs and let's talk to her first? Performance abusers, she knew exactly what to do in that moment. In her rage, she knew what to do. That's the first story. The second story was when she put an ad on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace that there were free items at my loft. And I started to get knocks on my door. My security people were like, there's someone here to pick up a free TV, a free this, a free that. People are coming. I'm like, what is happening? Well, we found the ad. I didn't place that ad. She placed the ad. So these people are coming to my door, coming to my building. I have no idea who they are. I was moving. I didn't place anything online for free, but it was a way to manipulate and abuse through my electronics that she still had access to, my Facebook, Meta, whatever. She still had, and she placed an ad. Free, come pick it up anytime. It'll be outside. So people are knocking on my door. Now, if that person knocked on my door and they were pissed that they didn't get their stuff and they attacked me, that's a different conversation, which is why this guy, he might have shown up for this fantasy, maybe he was a rapist, who knows? But I'm saying that the logic and the idea that this is possible, now that's a microcosm, okay? Like what we're talking about. But the probability of it being something that's very real, that happens on a regular basis for someone that has intent to disrupt and abuse is extremely real. It's happened to me. I told you, I'm here to tell the stories. I'm here to make it layman because this is very real. And I'm talking, had the garage opener. I was like, my garage opener is going up and down, up and down, up and down. So if someone's robbing me, I'm like, well, who is actually the person robbing me? Because they think they're getting stuff for free. Now, murdering, completely different conversation. We get that. But I'm just wanted to drive that point home is he could have easily been, I'm creating this fantasy to create a storyline, or he created the fantasy to facilitate a rapist. Mm-hmm. Either defense could go either way. But I'm telling you that it's possible. And it's hyper personal to me when I'm dealing with these psychos that I dealt with. And these are sometimes intentional, very intense, and very smart people. These aren't your homeless hobos, whatever. These are people who literally might work a 9 to 5 and have regular lives and then also want to go stab someone and rape them. Just saying. These are the stories we hear. We don't hear these stories of it's just, it's always some regular person that has something going on. And unfortunately, I have experienced it. I am alive and I am well, but in the same breath of everything that everyone's saying, it is absolutely plausible that both things can be true. And that's the point that I was getting at with this case.
I want to make a quick confession, and then I want to toss it to Josh for our final comments on Banfield. When I was a teenager and we lived in a gated community, I realized that like several of our garage door openers were like on the same whatever channel. And I would like drive around the neighborhood and open and close people's garage doors. I'm so sorry. I was like 16 years old, people. I super apologize for opening and or closing your garage door. I was a kid. And honestly, that's the worst thing I did when I was a teenager. So be it. Anyway, just wanted to get that off my chest. Josh.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Josh, somebody help me out.
My statute of limitations is done, so we're good.
You're good.
Josh,
You're good,
I want to get your final thoughts on Banfield. I want to ask you quickly. You mentioned the Slayer statute. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I wrote that down too. Can you please?
Well, what she pled guilty to, though, was manslaughter, because she did finally admit that Brendan shot Taco Supreme 6,000 or 7,000, aka Mr. Ryan, and she then shot him.
Yep.
So is she still able, since she pled guilty to manslaughter, can she still benefit monetarily from the crime?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I believe that the Netflix deal it was never finalized, and probably because of that, if for some reason she did get that money, the victim's family, in this case, the next of kin, would be entitled to all of it through restitution. So it would be a Pyrrhic victory for her. If she got it, she would never see it. And once she serves her sentence, she's going to be removed back to Brazil.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Holland, you never see a dime of that. And then tax wise, and then she, no, absolutely.
Well,
not.
it would go to the little girl.
It would go to the little girl. Yeah, absolutely.
And Holland, basically, to explain to you or anyone else that doesn't understand, I'm going to do it quickly in layman's terms, and then we're going to move on. It basically is something that states if you commit a homicide, a crime of some sort, you cannot then benefit from it. So, for example, Kohberger can't make a Netflix deal and benefit monetarily himself. He can't write a book and get the proceeds from the sales of that book. So just the same, Juliana now can't make money off of killing Mr. Ryan, being involved in the crime as a whole. I would presume she can't now make money off of that.
We're gonna move on. Can I quick question? Sure. So that is only for the legal, not for civil. That the Slayer statute is just for legal, not for civil. Because I'm thinking O.J. Simpson, when he wrote the book and was like, if I had done it, and he did monetize, and then he
actually didn't monetize. That book ended up in the hands of either Ron Goldman's family or Nicole Brown Simpson's family. And if you notice, if you look at the cover of that book, I Did It is in huge letters, and if is really, really tiny. And they did that on purpose. But somebody else did get control of that book and the proceeds from it.
Okay, just a quick thought.
But Holland, you're on the right track here, because OJ had a good argument that because it was titled as a fictional book, that he's not actually profiting off it, so to speak, and it was litigated. So I mean, you have reasonable minds can differ about the interpretation of the statute, and obviously a judge disagreed with his attorney's interpretation, and Ron Goldman's family was able to get the proceeds from the book.
Okay. Gotcha.
Thank goodness. And Josh, didn't that have to do also with the fact that they had a civil judgment against OJ? So it went to cover a piece of that judgment. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not restitution. It was a tort claim, but it still had a lot of teeth to it.
And that's why he thought, Holland, he would be able to write that book, because it was fictional. I'm air quoting for people who are listening, but also because he was found not guilty.
That was
very true. Good point. Yeah.
That was my question.
Although he was found guilty by a civil jury.
Correct.
By a civil jury. Exactly. Okay. That was my question. Okay.
And we all know he did it. Moving on. Okay. Moving on.
Right.
We're going to talk about ICE now, and not the chilly kind that Holland is experiencing in Atlanta. We're going to talk about the ICE operations, raids, whatever you want to call them, primarily that have been happening in Minnesota. I mean, they're happening all over the country, but we have been hearing a lot about the ones that are happening in Minnesota for a few different reasons. Renee Good is one of the reasons that we've been hearing about them. So, Josh, I'm going to start with you. So I have some tweets, some very recent tweets that I pulled from Governor Walz. And I want to know your thoughts before I read a couple of those and get the thoughts of both of you. I want to know, what are your thoughts on what is happening with ICE and how is it being handled? And is there anything that could be done differently or better?
Let's go.
Oh, you're up, Josh.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to read us the tweets. Okay.
Oh, you want me to read the tweets first?
No, that's fine.
Read the tweets. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Josh.
I feel like my role is to give a neutral legal perspective and then let the viewers kind of make their own decisions about what they think is right or wrong. So, I'm not going to give an opinion about the morality of what ICE is doing.
That's okay. Holland will do that for us. Go ahead.
But I look at what they're doing from a policy standpoint and a legal standpoint. And right now, ICE is legally in Minneapolis, and they are enforcing laws that are on the books. Specifically, they are targeting people that are not here legally, that have criminal convictions, or that are suspected of committing crimes. For example, recently it was revealed that a large community in Minnesota has fraudulently obtained billions of dollars through healthcare fraud. And this is actually connected to Governor Walz as well. And, he is going to have his own criminal legal issues coming up in the next year or two. And so ICE was in Minneapolis enforcing laws on the books. And obviously people don't like how this is happening. And they're protesting it, which is their First Amendment right. And we have two different examples that we can talk about here because they're very different. First, we have the Renee Good situation where, she was in a vehicle and she was told to get out. She refused to comply. And then she, pressed on the gas, went forward. We don't know what her intention is. And frankly, it doesn't matter. And then hit the ICE person who then shot her 3 times. I say it doesn't matter because according to the law, you don't look at the victim's intention. You look at what a reasonable law enforcement officer would do in that situation, given the facts on the ground. Nowhere in that legal inquiry is what was the intention of the victim, because nobody can ever know. The victim's dead. And so what we do is we evaluate it objectively. And we've already kind of covered that scenario during our first podcast. But let's look at this scenario, okay? And actually, one more comment. So one of the things that I don't like about the Renee Good situation is that it's the Department of Justice's response. The reason why I say that is, whenever somebody dies like this, and this is local, county, national, statewide, every death is investigated as a homicide until it's not. And Renee Good is no exception. It should be investigated as a homicide. And if there's a justification, fine. But there needs to be a finding, and it needs to be transparent. What you don't want is what the feds did, which is not do a criminal investigation. In fact, they said that they're not only not going to do that, but they're not going to cooperate with state law enforcement. So they can't do their own criminal investigation. And they said that the only investigation that they're going to do is a civil rights investigation. Were Renee Good's civil rights violated? Again, that's civil. And it also would make immune the law enforcement actions to the nth degree. So that that's not going to do anything. This case, with Renee Good needs to be investigated criminally. And again, let the chips fall where they may. We have a system that works. Let it work. To not even allow that case to proceed through the system, to me, is offensive, regardless of what I think about the morality of the whole situation. I still believe, and I think everybody here does, that we believe in rule of law and law and order. And they're not allowing that to happen with her case. Now, with this new one, I'm afraid that the DOJ is going to take a similar stance that it did with Renee Good, namely that there's not going to be a criminal investigation, which there needs to be, and they're going to have the same rhetoric as before. It's offensive rhetoric when you're not going to allow the criminal process to proceed. You can't call someone a terrorist without allowing them to go through the criminal process to make that determination, because a terrorist act is actually a crime. And you can't accuse somebody of a crime, again, unless you allow the process to proceed. So we have this situation. It was yesterday or the day before. There was another protest in Minneapolis, and a young man who was a nurse with no criminal history was at a ICE protest where protesters may have been obstructing, law enforcement's ability to do their jobs. Who knows? But he was sprayed with pepper spray at some point, and he was surrounded by quite a few officers. And the videos are not conclusive enough to determine exactly what happened. And the only thing that really matters is this. So the victim in the case had what legally carried and possessed a firearm. It was on his person. If at any point in time during that altercation he put his hand on his weapon, then there's obviously going to be a justification defense, and maybe a valid one. But we can't tell really by looking at the video whether or not that's true. But it needs to be investigated. It needs to be investigated criminally by the FBI or local law enforcement. They need to interview every single witness that saw what happened and ask them that question: did you see a gun? What happened with the gun? Did the victim's hand go on it? Did he draw it out? And if the answer is no to any of those questions, that's murder. There's no exception. Again, I'm not judging the morality of the ICE protesters or even ICE. I'm looking at this purely from a legal standpoint as a prosecutor and defense attorney, that you can't kill somebody without justification. And if there isn't a justification for self-defense, it's murder, and it has to be prosecuted as that. So with that being said, I think we can agree that these facts sound true enough. I want to make sure that we have the same facts, before we start debating a little bit of this. So, Holland, if you think that there are facts that I'm not considering, please let me know, and then we can talk about them.
I would like to add one thing really quick, Holland, and then I'll throw it to you. In addition, I would say, Josh, to did he reach for his weapon, draw it, anything? Did he reach for a weapon around him? So any of the officers' weapons, and that doesn't have to be just the firearm, because if he reaches for a taser of theirs, that can be considered that they would then be exhibiting or performing self-defense actions after that. So I just want to throw that out there, that there are other weapons present, and if he reached for those, it would also be potentially justifiable.
And Claudia was obviously a law enforcement officer, so she knows about this issue very personally.
Holland, throwing it to you. I'm scared.
Where do I start? Be scared.
Here's what. Okay, I'm going to say this. Here's where I don't want you to start. I don't want you to start that I shouldn't even be there, because we know you feel that way, and we know a lot of people feel that way. So let's make the agreement is that is what it is. That they're there. Go.
So it is what it is. But I do have to touch on a couple of things that Josh said, that while it might be factual to some degree, when we're talking about there's a large demographic of people that are robbing the system, love you guys, love everyone that's watching, but the number one welfare fraud is amongst white rural Americans in the United States of America. You can go do the
math. You can go look up the information. So we can start there. There's no ICE in those communities. They are not running rampant, asking for papers like the Nazi. They're not doing that. They're not tackling down white men, white women, white children, white old ladies in any demographic other than Black and brown communities. Does ICE need to be there? No, we've established that, but let's talk about intent. Josh, you mentioned the conversation about intent. We didn't know the intention of the protester. We didn't know the intention of the mask-covered ICE agent because they have their faces covered. We don't know who they are and what they're doing. So uncover your faces, you.
The protesters don't uncover their faces.
Well, a lot of them do, and a lot of them that don't they're the ones that they're being shot. They're also not armed, Josh. They're not armed.
And those white people that you were talking about aren't here illegally either. So ICE wouldn't.
But here's the thing. But they're still, it's fraud. I didn't say illegal. They were here illegally. They're still committing fraud.
Yeah, but so ICE would never arrest somebody in that situation because they don't have jurisdiction.
But here's the thing. So you're talking about morality. If someone here, if you have an illegal immigrant that is being targeted for paying their taxes because they speak a different language, they have a different skin color, and they're not here illegally.
Well, they're not paying taxes.
Hold on. You just spoke. Let me speak. You have a group and I said, let me start with demographic. The demographic that is being attacked based on how they speak, what language they speak, how they look, based on that, it is a Nazi system. They are not, nobody is checking their tax record. Nobody's checking if they're here illegally or not. They are attacking them based off their skin color and how they speak. Start there. It is not based off of, let me see your tax records. It's based off of, where are you from? Where are you from? What's your language? So that's what's happening with ICE. So you can argue that point on the back end if they're here illegally and when they go to jail and their documents are, submitted. But on the front end, what ICE is doing is stereotyping, profiling.
Yeah, but the person who was shot was here. It was an American.
Okay, so that's what I'm starting from the beginning, and then I'll get to the middle. I'm starting from the morality thing. I'm completely in agreement with you. I'm talking about, I had to button that up because if we're going to talk about fraud and robbing America and blah, 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 let's talk about who's doing it in the United States already before we start targeting people that may or may not be doing it. And they're only being targeted because of their skin color and their accent and their language. That's my point. Okay, so we can table that because that's not what we're talking about. Now, to the young man, the ICU nurse that got attacked, I saw the video. I saw he was trying to jump in. There were ICE officers. The fist was on the ground. The gun, it seemed a little distorted. I don't have the facts. I don't know. But what I'm saying is the last straw of shooting somebody point blank when you're supposed to be a trained officer. Claudia, you could jump in. If he didn't have the gun in his hand, even the other officers said the gun was over there. They all said it. The gun was not in his hand. It was over somewhere else, and he shot him anyway. It is I am the prosecutor, the juror, the judge, the whatever. I don't know what the line of chain of command is all the time, but it literally became a one untrained moment yet again when heightened emotion. So when you're saying you didn't know the intention of the victim, you don't know the intention of the ICE officer. He could have been someone that just wanted to get somebody that day. And that's what happens all the time. And that's the point that I'm trying to make when we have these conversations is just because you got a badge from some organization that should not even exist because of some guy that has emboldened a bunch of people that are ready to storm the streets, and we all agree they don't need to be there. They now feel that they have this tactical agreement amongst their little group that we can do whatever the hell we want all the time. And that's what happened that day. That's what's continuing to happen. And that's why the protests are happening. This young man, we should be able to protest. Now, if he was jumping in to help this other guy, I saw the video multiple times. I'm not an expert. I don't know. But what I saw was someone jumping in, trying to help somebody else, removing a gun. The gun got pushed away and he got shot and killed anyway. That's what I saw. And most people saw that as well. ICE is supposed to be the agency. They're supposed to be the authority. They're supposed to be the experts. I don't believe that for one breath of a second. But if someone is supposed to be trained to serve and protect and take an oath, that should be the last, course of action. Right now, this is not a department that is focused on morality. That's my point. It's not focused on morality. What it's focused on and being emboldened by hatred, by Nazism, by where's your badge? What language did you speak? They're not asking about your taxes and are you a fraud citizen? They're not asking.
What should happen to the Border Patrol agent?
They're arresting brown people who have accents. That's it. And they're shooting people that defend brown people that have accents. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. And you can argue the legal point, and I'm going to respect that because I love you to death. But that's what's happening. Anybody that gets in the way of an administration that is emboldening, is that the right word? I hope I'm saying it right. That is literally giving permission to just go rogue and do whatever you want to do in this society. That is what's happening, and that's why they're getting away with it.
Okay, I want to respond to a couple of things. Number one. The white community committing Social Security fraud or whatever, they are being targeted by the FBI.
Not by ICE. Not by
they
ICE.
won't be,
ICE,
but they
ICE
wouldn't be because they're not illegal. ICE is solely immigration and customs.
Well, how about this? Not by, okay, can I throw this out there? They are not being hunted down, questioned in any grocery store if they're using their EBT card. Are you legal? Are you not legal? And tackling them down and shooting them on site. It's not happening. And even if they're committing fraud, even if some random Mexican person that's here illegally that is literally using an EBT card that may be by fraud, they're not losing their life because they are brown and speak another language. Please have the conversation about
who's losing their life. It's Americans. It's not the person you're talking about. The two people that were shot in Minnesota were Americans.
I'm talking about the people that are being arrested and tackled down on a daily basis. Kids that are being dragged from their schools. People that are being traumatized on a regular basis because they're brown, Josh.
Okay, but you said killed. You said killed and shot.
Okay, I'm sorry. Being attacked and no white kid is being dragged out of school because his mother committed EBT fraud. It's not happening.
I'm sure it does.
Let me jump in here with some tweets because this goes to the point that you guys are talking about. Because one of them was, and this is from Governor Tim Walz, his official X account. Minnesotans want safety. They want freedom. They want what's best for our kids. Masked agents snatching preschoolers off the street and sending them to Texas detention centers serves none of those purposes. However, that's not what happened. What happened, the actual child that he was referring to was a 5-year-old child who was with his dad when his dad got arrested. And what would happen if this was an American is that child would be taken by CPS. And then a hearing would occur, to give it to, maybe if its other parent was there, that's what would happen. This is if we're dealing with a person who's here legally. They can't, what do you want them to do with the kid, right? They got to do something. So parents can either choose to be detained with their children or relinquish the custody of their children to a verified relative.
American children can be.
No. People who are detained for being here illegally, their children, if a child is with them, they can either choose to have the child detained with them, leave with them, or given to a relative who, generally speaking, has to go through some type of background check. So my point was, it's kind of the same if a citizen... If I arrest somebody and their 5-year-old is in the back of the car, I have to call CPS to come take custody of that child. Yes. So my only point is, I feel like that what Governor Walz said is purposefully disingenuous to spark outrage. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Well, it sparked the outrage.
But it's wrong. But that's the problem.
Okay. So what, to Josh's point, and also to agree with Josh, I understand the legal side and the different agencies. I get that point.
But the morality of all of this, the law is flawed. It's wrong. And so it's sparking the outrage because I'm not even going to say this. Every state is so different in their approach to everything, right? We know this. That's why, every state is so different. So your experience, I don't know whether it's in Phoenix, wherever everybody is, it is just a completely different experience. And watching this happen in another state that I am not privy to how things are supposed to, go down, it is very passionate because there are I've lived in multiple states. It would never happen like this. And because in other states, there is so much more of I don't know what the word, what's I'm sorry, but I'm losing my words. A dynamic, just like a cultural dynamic where these things just don't happen the way that they're happening, the way we're seeing them being played out. So I'm going to leave that there. I said what I said, and that's why I love talking to you guys, because I do want to learn the law and the systems in place. But it from what I know and then personal experiences and people that I talk to, there is a lot more to this than just one or two stories that unfortunately people lost their lives. There's so much more going on, and there's a target on backs that there just isn't a target on backs in other communities where people do get away with lawlessness, as Josh said, law and order. We are supposed to be a nation of that, but we're not. Because look at our president.
I want them all to be arrested.
I mean,
all the fraudsters. Please get rid of them.
Well, including the number one chief in charge. So that's just my opinion.
Josh.
Well, right now he's immune. He has presidential immunity, so he can't be arrested. And to Claudia's point is that if somebody is committing a crime, they should be held accountable, whether or not you agree with the crime or not. We're either going to have a society that enforces the laws or we're not. You can't selectively enforce the laws whenever you feel like it. You either enforce them or you don't. Now, regarding Governor Walz, now he's in a lot of trouble. He helped perpetuate the Somali community in committing billions of dollars in fraud, and they then funneled that money into his presidential campaign. And this is all unfolding. So, of course, he doesn't want the attention on him. So how do you get the attention off yourself? Well, let's inflame the passions and prejudices of people. And that's what he did with those tweets. It's insightful. It's inciting hatred. It's inciting violence. And that's what happened. And
Josh, do you not think for
irresponsible, to say the least.
Josh, and I hear you on that. That's exactly why we have the president in office, because he incited tensions and inflamed a demographic that thought they were being slighted. He funneled money through selling gold, selling hats, selling a dream, selling the racism, selling everything. We have a president in the office that is doing exactly what you just said. But that person, it's all trickling down. So we can, if you want to start with Minnesota, I understand that. That's a valid point. But we can start with the highest freaking seat in the United States of America, who's been doing this for over 8+ years. I mean, well, actually longer than that, because we had a little moment of interim with Joe Biden. But please do not think for 1 second that that's not exactly what the president of the United States did. He funneled money on a regular basis. So, now he's trying to do the same thing with everything else. He made himself rich. He made his counterparts rich, which is why nobody goes against him, which is why we're in the situation we're in. And he's continuing to embolden these type of atmospheres to continue to keep himself in power. If you can't recognize that, and if you want to dismiss that and talk about Somalia and one governor, by all means, I will agree with you. But the system does not start with Minnesota. It starts with the person in charge that emboldened this type of behavior.
Well, I we can certainly change topics, but I don't think we want to right now.
We don't want to, because we were one and two.
Let me ask you something. What do you think should happen to the Border Patrol agent who shot and killed the nurse? What should happen to him? If you had the purse string,
prosecuted properly, like you would say, like anybody would say.
Should he get the death penalty?
Absolutely not. No, I don't think so. I think so. I think it was a very, very, very bad judgment call from what I could witness. But I also think that we don't know his intentions, just like you didn't know the protesters' intentions. I felt like it was a knee-jerk reaction for being an untrained individual. Claudia can speak to that. I'm not the expert, but it seemed like it was a heat of the moment. Everything's heightened right now, and he made a really, really, really tragic decision.
Do you think we have all the facts? And I'm genuinely asking that because I haven't heard the statements of the other officers or witnesses. There's another video angle that I would really love to see that we haven't seen yet. Do you think we have all the facts?
Is that
Yeah, for you.
Oh, for me. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I would say, do we ever have all of the facts? No, because I mean that's kind of a loaded question, right? Like it's like, do we ever have all the facts? We're just here on this being able to have conversation. So we're not privy to half of the things that, of course, law enforcement, lawyers, all these people involved. What I think is that the power lies in the people in the agency with the guns who can control the outcome better than what they have. And the protesters can protest all they want, but the minute that you're in power with the weapons and the authority, you should be the one to de-escalate it. And so whatever the outcome is, that's going to be between law enforcement, a judge, and a really good defense attorney like Josh.
All right, Josh, I'm going to give you the very last word and we're going to close out. What I want to say, because Holland, you've mentioned it a couple times as far as law enforcement, and I don't have all the facts of this particular case. So I'm going to state that me personally, I've seen like the video that we've all seen. What I can say, if it were me, so if that person reaches for their own weapon, one of my weapons, somebody else's weapon, then they get shot. And the reason is because a lot of people say, well, if they just reach for your pepper spray, who cares if you get pepper sprayed? Well, if I get pepper sprayed, then I might not be able to see my life is now in danger because they now have time to get their weapon or my weapon and now shoot me. So I am in fear for my life. So I just want to put that out there in that split second. If they're reaching for a weapon and not like, a book that they can like smack you with, but an actual weapon, then in that split second, you can articulate, generally speaking, that you were in fear for your life or the life of someone else in the vicinity.
Claudia, just a quick question as a law enforcement officer. If he was reaching for the gun to remove the threat for the person that they were tackling and attacking, that's not. So if he wanted to remove the weapon, I'm just saying.
Don't touch the weapon. Don't touch the weapon.
But does a layman know that?
You should never. Oh, so we'll say this for anybody that watches this as a layman. Anytime that you are around armed police officers or any type of law enforcement, don't reach for any weapon for any reason, ever. Because if you do, just like you said, we don't know anybody's intentions, right? So we don't know, is he being a good guy and reaching for it to move it, or is he about to send me home in a pine box? I don't know. And what I do know is that these protesters don't like me. And so I have to go on kind of that knowledge as well.
And then vice versa. These ICE agents don't like me. So
So
I think that's the whole.
Yeah. But what would fix all of these questions is what Josh said earlier, a proper investigation done by the right authorities that determine whether or not these actions were reasonable or not. Josh, I want to give you the last word to close out on ICE today. This ICE conversation might never be over for us. We can probably have it again next week. But Josh, I want to throw it to you.
Thank you. So, we all have something in common, especially us three. And, we come from different homes, backgrounds, states, and, we can still come together and have a meeting of the minds. And I think that most people want to have the same thing. We all want safety and community and a sense of family. And if there are people or organizations that want to disrupt that harmony, we should look at them with suspicion, regardless of, we agree with their viewpoints. Because at the end of the day, we're all Americans. And I hope that we all want the best thing for everybody. And, when we look at what happened with the ICE situation, how would people who have something in common, who may disagree on the morality or motives, how could we come together? Well, again, we'd want the situation to be treated like anybody else. Justice is supposed to be blind. I think that as a community, regardless of your viewpoints, we expect there to be a proper investigation by a legitimate agency of neutral people to come to a determination of whether or not the Border Patrol agent who shot and killed that nurse, whether or not his actions were justified. And if they were not justified, we all as a community would want and expect him to be prosecuted in a court of law. And if he was justified as a community, we would expect him to be released. But that there has to be a determination for that to happen. You cannot have a functioning society without the rule of law and the equal application of law. So there you have it.
I love it. Josh, Holland, thank you guys again, as usual, for some spirited debate and conversation. And I will say it again, as I normally do at the end of our sessions, is that if people take nothing else from our conversation, please take the fact that we don't agree on everything. We do argue back and forth, but at the end of the day, we still love one another and we still want to be friends. So
Amen.
For Josh Colesrud, for Holland Reed, I'm Claudia King. This is No Contest, the Colesrud, King, and Reed Report. We will see you next time.